Good evening. We're going to take all of you beautiful people and shrink this giant, elegant banquet room and turn to sort of a fireside chat in a few minutes. We have arrived at the dessert course. We are going to be your caboose this evening. President Bolton, thank you very much for your incredible remarks and also for the kind introduction. Again, my name is PG Sittenfeld. I represent the city of Cincinnati as an at-large councilman. And in contrast to our superintendent's humility, I'm the son of a career school librarian. So the big screen television in our household was about 12 inches big. So I actually think being on a huge TV is kind of cool, actually. I mean, that might just be the elected official in me, however. Wearing my hat as a city councilman, we are so glad that all of you are here to share your ideas, to learn from each other, and of course to experience our great city. Wearing my other hat as the assistant director of the Community Learning Center Institute, where I've spent the last 5 years dedicating myself to working with our schools around the clock to turn them into hubs for community partnerships. I'm so glad and so grateful that you all are here, but more importantly that you all are doing everything you're doing back in your respective cities. Cincinnati is very grateful that a big part of our city's overall progress has been our success with community schools, which again here we call community learning centers. And when we say that it's been a team effort here in Cincinnati, we really mean it. Anyone and everyone who wants to help further this work has been asked to help along the way. And we hope that that is a big part of what all of you will ask yourself after hearing from tonight's panel when you return to your cities, is ask yourself, who's not yet at the table in your community that could be? Who else can you get to embrace the vision of community schools? Is there a foundation or a big company or an elected official who could get on board with this if only they knew more about it and if only you asked them to? Tonight's panel members have been dubbed the unusual suspects. They are not necessarily the folks that you would expect to see helping in the development of schools as community learning centers, and yet each of them, in their own way, has played a critical role in getting this work off the ground here in Cincinnati and building a strong community learning center infrastructure. It's my pleasure to now briefly introduce this luminary panel, and then we're going to get to the important part, which is hearing from them about what attracted them to this work and what has made it work. So first off, and again, this is not going to be the most florid introductions. These are all exceptional people, but I want to get to the heart of it. Darlene Kamine is an attorney by background, a former longtime magistrate in juvenile court, and the current executive director of the Community Learning Center Institute. Janet Owens is a physician by background, where previously he was elected to serve as the coroner here in Hamilton County, Ohio, and he's currently the president of the nearly 13,000 student Cincinnati State Technical and Community College. Jim Schiff is professor at the University of Cincinnati in the Department of English and Comparative Studies, and also one of the trustees at one of Cincinnati's most generous foundations, the Robert and Adele Schiff Family Foundation. And finally, Ivan Lugo is the former dean of the Temple School of Dentistry and is now at Procter & Gamble, helping oversee professional and scientific relations in North America. I'm going to head over to the fireside chat now. All right. It was a nice transition from the audio team. I'm all mic'd up. So the question for all of you, because you are the unusual suspects, is how did you get involved in this work? Why community learning centers? So Darlene, your name is famous amongst many here already, but if we can start with you, you were a magistrate in...
Wow.
You know, it makes the elected officials jealous when they get applause before they even said a word. But she's worth all of it. Your background originally, you were a magistrate in juvenile court. What attracted you to community learning centers from the very beginning?
Well, I was a magistrate in the dependency, neglect, and abuse docket for about 17 years. And every day of those 17 years, I saw children who were attending schools that were not the kind of school to which I would send my child. There had been such a disconnect, as Eve Bolton and Superintendent Ronan talked about, from the public, that we did not have the support of the community, we did not have the tax levies, and as a result, all of those kinds of things that are the joys, the extracurricular activities that are really the reason that kids want to come to school in the morning. They're the kinds of things that kids dream about being when they grow up, on sports and music and art and chess and all those wonderful things. They were all gone. Teachers were social workers, they were nurses, and it really was a very bleak and dismal situation. And I just thought every day, what do we have to do to make these schools the kind of schools to which we would all want to send our children? And that was with me for 17 years, and I finally had the opportunity to work with the community to begin to bring that back, to say what are the resources that we already have that can reconnect with our schools, and neighborhood by neighborhood, not what I would want for my child, but in every neighborhood, what does this neighborhood want for their children to be able to have those be the kind of schools to which they would be proud and delighted to send their children.
Well, there are a lot of people in Cincinnati who are grateful that you were willing to leave the bench to dive into the CLC universe. Dr. Owens, so you are now the president of Cincinnati State. Before that, your title was the coroner for Hamilton County. Not necessarily the most likely role to get involved, but again, you were involved as this idea was first taking root in Cincinnati, involved with the community engagement. How did you get involved, and why did this attract you?
Well, for me, I guess it started with my passion for education, which comes not from a promise or a pledge or an oath, but a promise to my heart. When I was in 9th grade, I was told I was too poor and too stupid to go to college. I had just flunked out of Walnut Hills, our most prestigious college preparatory school. But what happened, my mother died, leaving 7 kids behind. I was one of the oldest, and when someone was sick, I had to stay home. I couldn't get to school. No one looked at me as a whole person. And so for me, and when I was the coroner, around the platform, the higher the graduation rate, the lower the homicide rate. And indeed, if you raise your graduation rate in any community by 10%, you lower your homicide rate by 20%. But the process must start and at the elementary school, and that's how I got involved. It has to start at birth. And before the coroner, let me just let the audience know, before the coroner, I was a reproductive endocrinologist and created the first test tube baby in Cincinnati, so I get teased from cradle to grave. So we got that out of the way. We got that out of the way. I've heard it. But although I could help create life in a test tube, I've always been concerned about the quality of life for everyone.
And I just want to highlight for one moment, many of you are probably from places where you don't elect the coroner, but if you are, I mean, what a sort of radical but also common sense notion to have a coroner who runs on a platform of education. Not the most common thing, but it makes so much sense. Jim Schiff, you are a professor by day. You are a trustee of one of the most generous foundations. Your foundation, the Robert and Adele Schiff Family Foundation, could support so many different causes. You all care a lot about public education. Why did you see this model? Why did you see community learning centers as especially impactful and efficient?
No, it's a good question, PG, and I think for us initially, and as PG said it during the day, I am an English professor at UC, and in terms of the role that I have as a trustee, was difficult at first because there's a great responsibility, and we weren't always sure if we were doing the right thing, and we weren't maybe doing as much research as maybe we could have. But I think one of the things that happened for us when we decided that education would be a priority is it was pretty easy for us to give to universities and to give to independent schools and to give to a number of education initiatives, but we always wanted to do something for public education, but we just didn't know how to do it exactly. And it felt like there was kind of a large pot, and we felt like whatever we would contribute might just be dispersed and might not necessarily do anything that would be productive and successful. And fortunately for us, for our foundation, and I'm eternally grateful, we met Darlene, and really that was so important because I know from Darlene's perspective, we've contributed and provided capital that's allowed her to do the things that she's wanted. But from our perspective, we were able to do exactly what we wanted, which was to make some kind of mark on public education. And I think for us, it really did become fairly easy. I used to think that let's say a university would have a tremendous advantage because they have great development teams and tremendous giving opportunities. But what I did learn through Darlene was that for $75,000, which was basically the cost of a resource coordinator and benefits package, you could transform a school. A school of 500, 1,000 students their lives could be transformed through this one gift. And so that's really been important for us. So as I said, from a funder's perspective, we're grateful for the opportunity.
Dr. Lugo, everyone up here has so many, professor, magistrate, president, doctor. Dr. Lugo, I mentioned, you used to be the dean at the dental school at Temple. You now wear a hat with one of the largest corporations in the world, Procter & Gamble. How did you get lured into the Community Learning Center universe? And also, how did you see this model as impactful for impacting oral health specifically?
If you know Darlene, then you know how you get roped into this.
But she's staying in Cincinnati. You can't have her.
So we'll keep her in Cincinnati, but her impact is nationwide. Well, education is in my DNA. My parents are educators. So that is the foundation of why I believe in education from an early stage on. Prior to coming and joining P&G, I lived and worked in Philadelphia, where I had a chance to, there's a Philadelphia.
Tepid applause from the Philly crowd, yes. Shout outs welcome.
I was able to work with the community in trying to bridge the gap between the needs of the students in the community and in schools. If you know, in 2000, the U.S. Surgeon General released a report where it showed that dental caries was 5 times more common than asthma, and that kids were missing a lot of school days because they had dental infections. And then later on, if you're from Maryland or if you follow oral health, you see that there was a kid, a 12-year-old that died, the Amanta driver, and that spun Congress to really understand oral health and the impact that oral health has in learning. And not only learning, but in the self-esteem and many other ripple effects in the human being, particularly in the formative years. So it's important to really understand what makes a human being grow and develop in a very confident, healthy way in order to be able to produce efficiently their knowledge. And we have to remember that knowledge has no political boundaries. Knowledge is free for all and for us to guard and to develop as our children grow. And we need to protect that. So my interest in this when I came to P&G was really understanding. 17 of those years in Philadelphia, 10 of those were as dental director for the city of Philadelphia. So I understood a little bit of what was going on with Cincinnati because the demographics, particularly in the inner city, were very similar in terms of access to care and access to the points where individuals needed the care. It's not the traditional private practice model where you set up a practice and people come to you. When you're dealing with communities, you really have to understand how do you get the service to the communities in a way that they understand it and they want to receive it, not the way that it's top-down, where academics in their ivory towers design programs and then deploy, or continue the grant cycle where you don't create sustainable business models. And I see that in Cincinnati, that infrastructure for creating and developing a sustainable business model was already in place, and it was very easy to engage.
Dr. Lugo didn't say it, but in the spirit of looking out for my city's tax coffers, we'd like to invite all of you to brush your teeth with Crest before going to sleep tonight.
Please.
Feel free.
Thank you.
One of the beautiful things about being the moderator is you get to ask yourself a question. It's a great gig if you can get it. But I did want to briefly share how I came into this work. I started doing this 5 years ago, basically doing community organizing. You heard the superintendent and President Bolton speak about our $1 billion facilities master plan. So before we would go and build a $15, $20 million new school in a neighborhood, I would go and do what we consider very genuine community engagement, not checking the box, not saying we got everyone in a room so we can say, yeah, we asked their opinion, but having a meeting every 2 or 3 weeks for more than a year. Students, teachers, parents, faith leaders, community businesses, neighbors, on and on and on, and really saying, if we're going to design a school, how can we design it in a way that you're going to use it, that it will belong not just to the principal, not just to one group, but be a public space? And in doing that work, felt like I got to understand the needs and the challenges of various neighborhoods in a very specific way, So it's actually community learning centers, community schools that led me to want to run for office, and that was sort of my path there. Maybe perhaps not the most likely one. Dr. Owens, President Owens, back to you. So another one of your early involvements, aside from your coroner hat, before your presidency at Cincinnati State, was as the founding chair of Project Grad. If you could speak a little bit about that in terms of promoting college-going culture in the schools and how you see more broadly community learning centers removing those barriers to learning.
Project Grad, G-R-A-D, Graduation Really Achieves Dreams, was a program that started in Houston. And I was asked once to go to New Jersey to be a keynote speaker for Project Grad local graduation, and they were highlighting Shabazz High School. Prior to Project Grad coming to Shabazz, it was the worst high school in New Jersey. People were leaving the neighborhood. The school was a failing school. In Houston, a businessman had provided scholarships to a high school that was a feeder of Hispanic and African Americans. He went back years later and said, well, what did my money do? And they said nothing. It did not increase the graduation rate, did not increase the number of kids going to college. They need to do the preparation and started a program. The essence of the program, which we started here, is we chose 4 elementary schools, and we chose the 4 poorest elementary schools because we wanted to really prove that it was successful. We chose based on the percent of free lunch. They range from 94%, and I'm embarrassed to tell you that we had one elementary school of 451 students that was 100%. 100%. And part of that is it starts out by first engaging the teachers. 60% of the teachers must want the program in the school. After getting, the support of the school system, we then went and got the parents. In the earlier days, we went door to door. Each school system, we would get a group of people from the broader community, go door to door, and get each parent to sign a contract that they pledged to send their child to school and help them with the homework. If they did that, we would do everything we can to get them to college. And the essence of the program was to, in fact, it started with talking to a principal at Heberly, Pat Adams Stewart. Pat said she had 800 kids in September, 800 kids in June, a turnover of 50% though. So what we did was take those 4 schools and said you all are going to teach the same subject from the same book. So if you moved into a new school district in the middle of the year, that teacher could assess you, and therefore you could get immediate help. The key for that was we hired a resource officer. We knew that in order to make children successful, they had to eat. They had to be warm. We had kids that were failing math because they would look at the board and see an 8, there really was a 6. They weren't dumb, they couldn't see. And what happened, these schools would then flow into one high school. You would do 2 summer programs, and each kid would get $4,000 for college. Shabazz High School turned itself around. People start moving back into that community in New Jersey, and we saw some strength in the neighborhoods here in Cincinnati.
Darlene, obviously this work is having huge impacts inside the classroom, but it's not meant to end there. Talk a little bit about the broader impact in the community, how you see this work as revitalizing neighborhoods across the city of Cincinnati.
Well, just as you were talking about, PG, with the way in which we did the community engagement, neighborhood by neighborhood, the idea was to start every conversation with 2 questions. One was, what kind of school would you want for your own child? And also, what would make this the kind of neighborhood in which you would want your children and grandchildren to live? And so with the creation of that vision, what role can the school play in improving the neighborhood and making the quality of life attractive to bring people back to the neighborhood, to keep people in the neighborhood? As a result of that, all kinds of things have happened, as unique as every neighborhood is, and for all of you who went on the site visits, as we've talked about, there are 52 neighborhoods in Cincinnati, and every one is its own country. They have a sign that says, welcome to, and they really are very, very unique. And with that same unique vision, we have one neighborhood that was an aging neighborhood. They were concerned about bringing young families when the houses were going on the market. And they created in the old school that was going to be replaced with the new construction, an art center, which has now created tremendous vitality for that neighborhood and has become a real hub. We have another community, it's the school that serves my neighborhood. And the question that community, there were hundreds and hundreds of people engaged in that process over a period of time. And one of the questions was really, what is going to make this the kind of school and the kind of center for the neighborhood that will bring people back? That school, when we started the process, had less than 300 kids, almost all high poverty, even though that was not reflective of the whole neighborhood. And now that school is really bringing people, when real estate agents advertise the community, They advertise the name of that school. They say this school is, sir, is the neighborhood school for this neighborhood. So neighborhood after neighborhood, we really see that that particular vision. We have another community in which it's become an international hub that has reached out to say we want the immigrant families, we want the new families coming to this country to live here, not to move to the northern suburbs. And so in each one of those cases, it really has been a tremendous transformation that has been catalyzed by and supported by the school as a hub. Overall, I think what has happened with this energy in every single neighborhood is that now you see the whole city connected to the public schools again. The support for the levies, the support that we have with all our partners, it really has, I believe, transformed. We're all proud now to say Cincinnati Public Schools are our schools.
And in the spirit of broader community impact, in Cincinnati, as you probably gathered, the city government, and the school system, totally separate political jurisdictions. So separate budgets, separate elected officials. But as a city council member, I know that our most powerful tool for economic growth, our most powerful tool for having a qualified workforce, our most powerful tool for lifting people out of poverty is always going to be our school system. So this wasn't always the case in Cincinnati, and I would, thank you. I would encourage everyone in this room, I know we have a number of elected officials with us, but where your city council members or your mayor don't have jurisdiction over the school system, it should be part of their job description, part of what they think about when they wake up in the morning. What am I doing to still support our schools? Because if the school system's not working, the rest of the city isn't working. I also want to invite the panelists, rather than feeling they need to make eye contact with me, take in this beautiful audience of 1,500 people, because the opportunity doesn't present itself very often. Another specific partnership we want to highlight. Jim, back to you. You all recently, or relatively recently, made a major investment for an early childhood learning center at Euler School. Why'd you decide to do that, and how do you see it fitting in with the sort of bigger picture of community learning centers?
You know, and I wish I could take full credit for that as my brainchild, and maybe someday through selective memory I will. But but the reality is, you know, I feel very fortunate to have our name connected with that, and particularly because my father grew up in the neighborhood. He grew up in Price Hill and Purcell Avenue. And so it's wonderful. If you haven't been over to see the Early Learning Center over at Euler, it's spectacular. And I can say that objectively too, because I feel like really my name is there, but or our family name is there, but it's really other people who did all the work and put it together and thought it up from the ground. But the reality is, I think we had a tour. I think Darlene and Craig Hockenberry were giving me a tour of Euler. And, you know, we were so impressed by everything we'd seen and heard. And I think I had said, you know, what can we do? Because our foundation was in a position where we could certainly do a lot more for the school. And so I think my question was, what can we do? And then, you know, the response from Craig was an early childhood program. And I think at the time, there was a very small preschool program at the school, but not much was really taking place. That kindergartners would come in and had never opened a book in their life, didn't know where they lived, and also, you know, just really had kind of no support. And even the kids in the Euler preschool, as I understand it, were not even from Lower Price Hill, because they really weren't able to get into the school. So from Craig's perspective, this is something that we absolutely had to do. It was very important. So it was easy from our perspective, because you know, I think not only is the community learning center idea very attractive from our perspective, but you've got Darlene, you've got Craig, you've got PG, you've got Jamie, you've got all the resource coordinators, you've got Patty Gleason in the early learning center. You've got all of these people who are so magnificent that you absolutely trust them and you trust their judgment. And we trusted Craig, and wonderful things happened. So.
Yeah, I think one of the mantras that we've sort of absorbed is that this is not just good for students, it's not just good for schools, this is good for everybody. So, Dr. Lugo, you have the weight of one of the biggest corporations in the world behind you. Why is this a good investment for Procter & Gamble?
I mean, if you understand the principles and values of Procter & Gamble, you understand that the company is built from its DNA over 150 years in doing the right thing. And living and existing and thriving here in Cincinnati is just the right thing to do to ensure that the future of Cincinnati, starting with its kids and the development, the workforce, the talent, the pool, is well taken care of. I mean, these are the individuals who will be taking the helm of the company in the future. So it's important to be good corporate citizens, but it's more important to ensure that we improve the lives of people, particularly here. It's astonishing to know that there are cities and places and neighborhoods that children don't even have a toothbrush. And more astonishing is that food stamps cannot cover a toothbrush, but yet it covers other non-nutritional things. So these are the policy repercussions of other things that we need to work around. It's not only providing the right tools and the education for the kid and the families to understand that good behavior and imprinting that behavior at an early age is important, but also we have to make sure that we provide the tools so that they are able to have those tools at home early on and create that habit early on that will yield in the prevention of and savings in the healthcare costs later on when they're adults.
We have 2 more questions for our panel, and then we're going to cut everyone loose to go have a wild, raucous time in Cincinnati. As long as you promise, Marty Blank, that you'll be bright-eyed and bushy-tailed at your first plenary session in the morning. But since you all, each sort of in different ways, in your own way, are the unusual suspects, I'd be curious to know sort of what surprised you or what insight have you taken away? Since, again, you're not necessarily the folks that people would expect to see smack dab in the middle of the community learning center universe. So why don't we start down with Darlene, we'll go down sort of surprises along the way.
I think the generosity and flexibility of our entire community. My husband always says, don't make eye contact with Darlene because you'll get sucked in. And it's so true that every single time I have lunch with somebody, by the time the conversation is over, they want to be involved in some way. And it's not me. It really isn't. It really is because there is such an opportunity when there's an infrastructure, when there's a way to be able to become connected. It just happens, and everybody sees themselves in this way. And so it really has been, it hasn't been a hard sell. It really has been just amazing and joyful to see all different kinds of people coming together and creating this new world for us here.
Jim, whatever you do, do not look to your left. I'm telling you, don't.
You know, I've already looked there. And it's too late, PG.
Jim, you've been involved, hugely generously, sort of on the funding side, but in other ways. What surprised you about this work in your involvement?
Well, I think probably mostly about how much you could do with so little. I think I talked before about the cost of a resource coordinator and benefits package, $75,000 roughly. And it's interesting because, in our foundation, we've also provided a number of college scholarships, and I think the going rate now at certain universities is $61,000, $62,000 a year. And I don't regret any of the scholarships that we've provided in university because I've talked to a number of the kids, and I think it's doing tremendous things. But I also think for just a few $1,000s more a year, you can, as I said, transform a school, and that's really surprising. So I think it's a very cost-efficient model, which I think would be very appealing to funders. So I think that was a surprise that for $75,000 you could transform a school. But I also think there's more to that too, and it's kind of what I referred to before, is you need the Darlenes and the Craigs and the Jamies and other people who are doing that work. So.
Dr. Owens?
I guess for me, with all the ups and downs of the world over these past few years, it's been a pleasant surprise that there's still a lot of women, a lot of people, huge cohort of people who truly have love in their heart for their fellow human being and for children.
Dr. Lugo?
It's transformative social change at its core. I think what has been created in Cincinnati is a framework to really pilot and deploy and scale something that really works if you're able to tweak the model, adjust it with the right culturally appropriate sensors, and tweak it for that particular community. But it is certainly a model that has shown promise, and one, if you're looking at a product supply chain and applying it for social good, you really crack the code in being able to produce some sustainable, transformative change in communities. But more importantly, it's providing holistic care for all children, both mentally, physically, and in their soul. So thank you very much.
And PG, what surprised you about this? I thought you'd never ask. You know, this has been a genuine surprise, and I would tell this to your elected officials too. The political saleability of this work, of this model, of this policy is unlike anything I've ever seen. And don't take Sittenfeld's word for it. There is a bill currently moving through the Ohio General Assembly that is co-sponsored by a fierce, strong Democrat and a Tea Party Republican to say, let's take this model that's worked so well in Cincinnati and let's expand it across the entire state of Ohio. So if someone doesn't like this policy or finds some political problem, there's something wrong with them. And that was a surprise. All right, we're gonna round this out with a little bit of a mission moment, and then again, everyone will be released into the cool Cincinnati night. You know, a moment you've had along the way, and we'll make it succinct, it's made you say, you know, this is why it's been worth it, this is why I got involved in this. Dr. Lugo.
For me, it was an event that we were doing, teaching children about oral health. It was a second grade, and I remember distinctly this little girl named Haley, which after we finished, she grabbed my hands and she said, "Don't go." Just her cry for help was just an impactful moment. It was a meaningful moment for me. It really solidified in my mind that any energy, any work that is done to improve the health of little children and the future of our country is really worthwhile. So for me, Haley is that North Star that will keep me going in making sure that my efforts and my energy are put towards good efficiency and good results for our children.
Dr. Owens, your mission moment.
I guess partly when we had a breakfast and lunch, and even after school snack in the school, and one boy in first grade, he just had breakfast, and he walked into the classroom, looked at the teacher and said, "When's lunch? When's lunch?" And they just told me it's a child that's been hungry for a long time.
Jim.
You know, actually, just a couple weeks ago, Darlene and Sandy Smythe brought the Griffin staff, the newspaper staff of Euler, over to UC, and we spent part of the morning together, and there were probably about 15 students, and it was really interesting because, well, first of all, I wanted to give them something, and I'd gotten some donuts, but I felt like I've got to give them something, you know, more tangible. So I had a stack of the Cincinnati Review, which is a quarterly journal that we publish, and actually I'm very proud of it. I mean, we had last year, we had as many poets in the annual volume of Best American Poetry as the New Yorker did. So that's my plug for the Cincinnati Review. But the reality is I do have a stack of these in my office, and people are not lining up necessarily to pick them up. And so I thought, well, I'll just take a stack over. And it's actually a beautifully, I keep on making a pitch for it, but it's aesthetically, it's really a beautiful journal. So I took a stack of them, and I passed them out to the students, and I thought, well, okay, I've been a good host. Well, 2 or 3 times over the next hour, the one student said, "This is terrific." And he was reading poems from the journal. And I was like, wow, this is really amazing. This is great. And you know, that turned out to be a meaningful gift. And then I remember I also said to the students, I said, "Where are you going to college?" And again, this was I think Darlene has told me in the past, before 2010, nobody had gone to college. And they were all going to college, and some of them had multiple offers, and that was exciting. And then they asked me where my dad grew up, and I said Purcell Avenue, and then I heard from you later that a few of them had lived on Purcell Avenue. So it was really wonderful. I mean, it was very moving, and I felt like, you know, these kids were just so eager to absorb as much as they could. So.
Absolutely.
Darlene, to close us out, you've been involved in this for 15 years now. Your mission moment.
Well, that was actually going to be one. But fortunately, I have a mission moment every day, you know, by the hour. And I can tell you, I can share with you one of the earliest moments that we had when we were working on the very first school. The Riverview School was one of the very, very first schools that we were working with the neighborhood to create a community learning center. And it was a very difficult process, and altogether it took us 7 years. And we finally got to the point where we had the groundbreaking. And one of the women who had been involved in this community was a very much traditional urban Appalachian woman. She was a construction worker, hard-boiled all the way through the process. And that day we came to this groundbreaking, and it was muddy, it had just rained, we were standing in where this new school would be built. And there was a woman who stopped me as I was walking in, who was wearing a beautiful flower dress, and she had a beautiful hairdo, and I didn't recognize her. If she hadn't stopped me, I wouldn't have known who she was. And I said, "Oh my gosh, Betty, you look beautiful." And she said, "This is the first time that I've ever had my hair done. I bought a new dress because this school, this is the most important day in my life, to have this school." And I think that was one of the moments that many, many have come since, but that was one I'll never forget.
That is just a glimpse of the Cincinnati story that's unfolded over the last decade plus, excuse me. And I guess my own sort of humble final piece of advice to everyone here would be, go home and be expansive, be imaginative about who you can enlist in this work. Find your Darlene Kamine, find your Jim Schiff, find your Odell Owens, find your Ivan Lugo. Please join me in giving them a big round of applause.
Thank you. And your PG Sittenfeld.